Welcome, everybody, today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jorin Pintna, and I'm the project manager for the Green Book Alliance. Today is kind of a celebration and also an invitation. We are celebrating the launch of the Carbon Calculator. We'll be showing you all how it works, discussing where we go next, but also calling you all in to engage and participate in this work that we all feel is really important. I want to take a moment to acknowledge everyone who helped to make the project possible. BIC, BISG, and BookNet Canada, of course, and then our project partners and sponsors, Breezens, Gibbsmith, and Publishing Scotland, as well as everyone who tested and provided feedback. Some quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and questions can be added to the chat throughout, but we'll leave time for discussion at the end. A brief agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the origins of the project, why the calculator matters, and the development of the web version that we have launched. We'll then move into a live demo, and I am going to suggest that attendees follow along with my calculation on their own accounts. So first of all, if you are on this call today and you have not made an account yet, it only takes a minute, and I'd suggest that you do it now. We'll pop the link to the Carbon Calculator in the chat. And then finally, at the end, we'll have some time to discuss about kind of the future of the project and where we hope to go from now. On a final note, before we jump into things, I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge something special, which is that this is actually Brian O'Leary's final webinar, because as of tomorrow, he is retired. Brian is a founding member of the GBA and has been an incredible advocate for sustainability in publishing and a driving force behind so much of the work that has brought us here today. I personally have learned so much from you, Brian. Thank you for always being open to my questions, offering guidance, and for making me feel capable and letting me, really grow into this role. So thank you so much for your work on this.
Thanks, those are really kind of you to say. Appreciate
of course. Now, without further delay, I would like to hand things over to Jen and EJ from ECW Press and New Society Publishers. They are the original masterminds of this project, whose dedication to sustainability reaches far and wide and who were there from the beginning. And Jen will be sharing a bit about kind of how this project first came together. So Jen, I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Hi, everyone. It is so exciting to see all the people here today and to know how many people who have already tested this tool and gotten involved. This was something that EJ and I sort of dreamed up years ago now. I'm kind of almost sorry to say it took a while. So this started when we had an informal, which we still have, monthly meeting to discuss sustainability issues at our presses and in the industry as a whole. When we were dreaming up this project, we were also fortunate to be sometimes joined by Noah Genner, who was committed to sustainability and this tool. And it's in part due to his faith in us and commitment to the tool that we have it today. New Society already had a carbon calculator that could provide a company-wide estimate, so do kind of carbon accounting, which was developed in 2006 by their author, Guy Dauncey. ECW had also used that calculator, which is an Excel-based tool, in recent years. But we realized we could potentially develop a tool that could be updated to help everyone. And so we started the grant application gauntlet and were eventually approved by the Canada Council Digital Greenhouse Fund. It is those funds that are the backbone of this entire project, so we're enormously grateful to them. We interviewed various carbon accounting companies and eventually engaged Ian Lipton at the Carbon Accounting Company in Toronto to design this tool. But the tools soon became two tools because we knew we wanted something that we wanted to update that old tool that gives us a sense of a publisher's overall footprint. But we also wanted something that would help people at crucial decision-making junctures. So then it wouldn't just be about calculating carbon we'd already released, but potentially preventing new carbon from being released, which is even more important, as we know. So we wanted a calculator that could analyze different variables and show people where the biggest impact would be. We know that as publishers, we know that we are all working with a lot of constraints. And so we wanted to test our assumptions and help people make the best possible decisions. In 2025, after around a couple years' work and many more gray hairs, we had two tools to share that we're still very proud of. One is the updated version of that original New Society tool, so the Publisher's Footprint tool. And the other is the one we're kind of focusing on today, which is calculating emissions for one book. So the other tool you can still find on the BookNet website if you search the sustainable publishing tools. I'd encourage you to download it if you want to measure any aspect of your operations. You don't have to do the whole package. Even if you just wanted to look at flight emissions or building emissions, for example, that tool can be really useful for you. Um, it is an understatement to say that we were ecstatic when GBA was willing to take on our baby and give it a glow up and make it accessible to everyone without licensing restrictions. Neither EJ or I are programmers or data analysts, and none of making these calculators was part of our regular jobs. I'm supposed to be concerning myself with rising action and comma splices and things like that. But we're people who care deeply about the climate crisis and want to see more business leadership in the climate space, especially when our political leaders are letting us down. So we are so glad to have handed it over to the real experts. And we really encourage you to dig into this tool and its new amazing form and take it back to your teams.
Thank you so very much, Jen, for giving us those insights. The work that you have both put into this is amazing. And, we appreciate the support that you've given, the next steps of this project as well. Brian, we're going to turn it over to you now about kind of the why of this project and GBA's rationale for, taking on this work and how we're moving into our next steps.
Thanks, Corinne. And I want to echo what you said about Jen and EJ. It really is a pleasure to work with you and build on the work that you've already accomplished. You had to break through a lot of hurdles to get to where you were, and we feel like we've just done that much more to try and make this more accessible to a broader audience. So in working to create a web-based carbon calculator for the industry, the Green Book Alliance was trying to address two problems at once. The first one, and you'll see it in a minute, most calculators have been kept behind closed walls or offered as basic calculators that don't necessarily capture the complexity of the book industry. Jen and EJ had developed a calculator that it did have a license, but it really didn't also capture the complexity of the book industry. By making the calculator freely available, and building on one that's built to reflect the publishing supply chain, we think we've kind of tackled that first challenge. But the new calculator also gives publishers a tool to calculate the carbon footprint of a print run before a purchasing decision is made. And in this instance, we're looking at data that shows in advance the carbon intensity or the estimated carbon intensity of sourcing and paper decisions. That means publishers can use the tool to understand the impact of their choices. This is an approach that's consistent with the publisher printer guidance that GBA published initially in 2021 and has updated in stages since then. Our basic idea is that awareness informs conversations with trading partners. To the thing that you'll see here is that to make the carbon calculator freely available, we elected to omit paper data. So licenses for paper data cost money, and there are ongoing obligations, and it hamstrings to a certain extent how freely available a calculator can be made. Historical data is interesting, but it's not as helpful in making sourcing decisions, meaning that if you're just calculating things once a year, you're not really thinking about what the print run in front of you is going to do. So rather than create a model that pre-populated with carbon footprint data for the wide array of book publishing papers, we built a solution that can be modeled on a publisher's interests in building partnerships with its manufacturing sources. Um, we absolutely recognize that adding new data to a sourcing decision, calculating carbon, requires a change in workflows. You have to talk with your printer about their carbon footprint and the carbon footprint of the materials they're using on your project. There are questions about where you find the data and where do you find the time. Um, and this is a juncture at which a standards-based organization, whether it's BIC, BookNet, or BISG, will typically tell you, oh yeah, we worked it out, here's what you do. And the reality is we haven't worked it out just entirely. We can't identify best practice for something that very few organizations are doing at this point. But at the same time, as Jen articulated, we can't ignore the impacts that climate change and continued emissions may have on this planet. So, as we show you this model, we're proposing something simple. Use it to talk to your printer about the CO2 equivalent data for the paper stocks that you specify or they recommend, and use those numbers in the model and calculate the carbon intensities of as many or as few configurations as you choose. And if your printer doesn't have access to CO2 equivalent data, start the conversation with them about where they need to get what they need from you to get the information, and then evolve from there. We're really proud of this work, and I think you'll be really impressed by the model that Jorin is about to show you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Yeah, so this is kind of where we're coming from in terms of why this work matters and where we're trying to go with it. And so I'd like to talk just before we jump into the demo a little bit about what we've been building over the past several months. So the original calculator absolutely proved there was real interest, the one that was created by ECW and New Society. But we did, know that the Excel tool could only take us so far. So our goals for version 1 of the web calculator were to make it easier to use and improve accessibility, create a platform that we could continually improve and make updates to, and make it available to a wider audience. And so through development, we really focused on balancing usability and transparency, and trying to accommodate, the flexibility for different publishing workflows. And our testing primarily for this version involved comparing outputs from the original Excel version to the web version of the calculator. And it translated really, really well. In our early adoption, since launching, we've already seen very encouraging engagement. We have 85 users in the first month, from countries. The countries represented are Canada, the US, the UK, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and France. So we're excited to see interest from well beyond North America as well. And I think that this demonstrates that there is an industry-wide appetite for practical sustainability tools. Of course, this is version 1. It is not our finished product. We, know that carbon accounting is constantly evolving, and we want the calculator to evolve alongside that. So some things that we're already thinking about are improving the emission factors used to be more specific to each region, adding additional paper and printing options, expanding reporting, and we've had many other features already suggested and requested by users. So we're keeping all of that in mind while also kind of moving forward in a way that is going to make sense for what the tool is trying to do, which is continue these industry conversations and bring people together on this topic. But without further delay, we know the best way to understand the calculator is to see it in action. So I am going to invite people to open a calculator on your own computer, and follow along. I'll be using a sample data set, so you can just copy my responses to get a feel for how it works, even if they're not quite numbers that necessarily apply to you. And I would encourage you to jot down any questions you have as we go. Okay, let me just jump to it. Okay, There we are. So this is the dashboard that you should see once you log in. I have a couple different calculations already on the move here. As you can see here, you can see it in different views. So this sort of tile view or in a list. I have several drafts and then some completed calculations, but we are going to be working on the sustainability story today, which is a draft. So let us jump right into here, starting with section 1, which is book parameters. So we have calculation title, ISBN, and then the title of the book. So the calculation title and the title of the book are different in case you run a title multiple years or on different print runs. My number of pages is 328, and this is a paperback or soft cover. Today, my units of measurement that I am using is inches, but you can toggle between centimeters and inches. And there are just a unit reference note there. The spread width that I am using is 15 inches and the spread height is 9. The standard basis weight for paper is 57 pounds, but if you had changed the reference, the units of measurement, then that would read differently. And this is all used, so these 3 things. So let me just show you. If I changed this, let's make it bigger. If I changed this, if I changed this, it would change the calculation of the paper weight density, but let's bring it back to 57. Okay, so that is our text paper dimensions. Then we move into cover dimensions, and the cover width I'm using is 15.75 with a cover height of 9 and a standard basis weight cover of 100 pounds. And that again then brings us to this calculation here. This book is not print on demand, and our print run is 4,000. So that's my first page done, and I'm just going to hit next. This brings us to in-house operations. In-house operations, our publisher country here is Canada, but you have many different options, and we're going to use British Columbia as the province and territory. Now, this is an area that has, I think, tripped some people up, so I want to focus on it for a moment. Total number of units of titles published per year. So this number is going into kind of your overall in-house, and it gets divided between the number of books. So it is not if you published 12 titles, it's how many units of titles. So total number of individual books that were printed and published. So in this case, it is almost 100,000, over 100,000. And so if you had misunderstood this and put, okay, we did 8 titles for the year, that is what's going to make, or one reason that you might find your carbon footprint at the end is massive. So making sure that this number is reflected of the correct value. And there is a little tooltip here that also explains that. Yes. If you know your consolidated scope 1 and 2 emissions, you can say yes, and you can input them here. If you say no, you are able to look into calculating this or like an estimate. So you can add heating fuel type, annual quantity, electricity, steam and hot water, company vehicles. But to simplify for right now, I am in fact going to say yes. And so we're going to leave it there. Perfect. Okay. Bringing it into content creation, we're specifying the roles involved in content creation and the work arrangements for the title being calculated. So we are going to say type of book. This one is nonfiction, general audience, level of illustration. And these are then going to estimate kind of what the carbon footprint may be based on what you select here. Now, something that is important to note is yes, this is an estimate. It does feel like it is not super precise, and we've had some feedback on that. But that being said, this does not account for like a massive part of the carbon footprint. So we have found that in general, an estimation in this area is sufficient. But again, we do understand that this can be a little bit confusing. Now, for content creation roles, essentially, if you select that it is in-house, that will be captured under your in-house operations already. And so it is only if it is outsourced that it will add to your carbon footprint from this kind of window. So for this author, we're saying outsourced, editor in-house, illustrator in-house, designer in-house, typesetter outsourced, production manager in-house, copy editor outsourced, and rights manager in-house. So by selecting those things and just by toggling one or the other, it is basically designating whether there should be additional carbon put into this area or if it's captured under your in-house operations that was already captured in the previous. Okay, let's hit next there. We're now moving into paper production. And I will say paper is one of the things that impacts the carbon footprint the most. So this is something that we have really tried to work on because it is also one of the hardest things to capture and to get accuracy on. So we have had the wonderful privilege of having Sistana supply us with some of their paper numbers. So if you use Sistana 100% recycled papers or Sistana 30% recycled papers, all you have to do is click that and it will input those numbers for you. That's it. We have some generic options, and these are specific only to EU, North America, and then rest of world. And these are generic. So they'll provide an amount of estimation, and we've decided to include them so that this is not a major barrier because we do know it is hard to get paper numbers. But that being said, if you're using the generics, you should consider that with, the context of what they are and the accuracy that they would provide. And the other option you have is manual entry. And this is one of the ways that, in fact, you can have the most accuracy. So you can create a paper category and input the emission factors, as well as including the mill city and mill country. This would have to come from talking to your supply chain partners. And this is one of the ways that, we are hoping that this can stimulate these kinds of conversations within the industry, because again, paper numbers really vary depending on the mill, the location of the mill, the location of, your organization, the power grid that you're using. There are so many factors that go into this. And so having manual entry is important, but it is also complicated. And so that is something this is something we would really encourage people to try and utilize because it will give you the best kind of and most accurate outcome. But that being said, it does involve some work. So we've tried to create sort of 3 or some different categories so that this is not a huge barrier because we want people to start using this now. But this is kind of the work towards that we are going for. And if you input a paper, you can save it for reuse on your profile. So it doesn't necessarily go out to a wider database. It won't be shared with everybody because right now, I think there is a certain amount of worry or hesitancy around sharing this information because organizations are worried about how that may impact their business. But for now, at the very least, and we hope to, push for more transparency moving forward and for this to be things that people are comfortable sharing. But if you, as an organization, go to your supply chain partners, you're able to acquire some of these numbers, it will save to your profile and only your profile, but you can reuse it for future calculations. That being said, we're going to go all the way back to the Sistana. Here for cover stock, I have selected manual entry. This is not a real paper category, but I have input it. I have said this is my emission factors. I'm going to save it for reuse. And that's going to save to my profile. So I could use that one again now. And then I've included at the bottom our paper waste percentage. If you know this, you can put in more specific, but the standard is 30%. Okay. Moving forward, we now have printing. So for the printer, I have generic printer options. We are hoping to include more printer options as we move forward, but then you can select through here. I have offset printing, and then the printer city is going to be Winnipeg, and the country is Canada. Then moving into ink type, we have printing ink, offset, 47.5 solution. Again, these are also areas that we're hoping to expand on, but for now, this is what we are able to work with: vinyl acetate and acrylic varnish. Now, again, compared to paper, this section will impact the carbon footprint less, and so selecting category not listed, though again, not as accurate, and we're hoping to get more accuracy in these areas as we move forward, is something that does not affect the calculation nearly as much, or as the paper, which is why that is like a huge focus of the work and the conversations that we want to be pushing people to have. Okay, this brings us to transportation and distribution. So for here, we're starting with leg one, paper supplier to printer. So my origin city in this case is going to be Quebec City in Canada, and the destination is going to be Winnipeg, and the transport is rail, though you can select a variety of options here. Then we're going to do distribution printer to distribution cities. And you can add a series of distribution legs, but in this case, I have two. It is going to be Winnipeg to Toronto on medium and heavy duty truck, and that's going to be 75% of the print run. And then Winnipeg to Jackson, United States on medium and heavy truck, and that's going to be 25% of the print run. And it will show, so let's say I put this to 15%, it will show that we only have 90% of the print run. So we're aiming for a total of 100 there, and then it will show that it's all allocated for. Finally, we are coming to end of use. And this is something that can be utilized in different ways, because if you're doing this beforehand or kind of at the time that production decisions are being made, this will have to be an estimate. You can go back and edit calculations or duplicate a calculation if you wanted kind of an actual versus your estimate, and go back and change these once you know more concretely kind of what it will be. So for this, we are going to have 20% of books unsold, and the disposal method of unsold books is going to be 99% recycling and 1% donated. We're really going for sustainability friendly on this, but you have options for incineration and landfill as well. And then for percentage of books returned, we have 10%, and we're going to say 90% recycling and 10% resold. Here you can add a final note before you calculate, and here I've said end of use numbers are estimates, update May 2027. So you could put that note in for yourself so that you could go back in case you were estimating and you wanted to do actual. But that being said, we've also had people who say they're using this for their carbon offsets immediately, and so it remains an estimate and they don't look back and redo calculations. So it really depends on kind of what timing in the cycle that you're using this and kind of how accurate it would be. But you can add any additional notes at the bottom here for the full calculation, just to remember. You could say, I had to estimate this number, or I'm unsure about this, I have to go back and add certain numbers when we have them, just so that you can remember exactly what you've done. Now, if I hit save and exit, it would continue to save this as a draft, and I could come back to this work. But that's not what we're aiming to for right now. So let's hit calculate, and that's what it's going to give us our final outcome. So you can see it as a pie chart or a bar chart. What we see is paper production is most of where the carbon footprint is coming from here, and then printing is secondary. So it will give you the breakdown in a chart. It will give you the breakdown kind of by each section and how many kilograms of carbon are created and then, or utilized in that area. And then we have some carbon equivalencies. Note that for these carbon equivalencies, the source is the EPA greenhouse gas equivalencies. So it is US focused in terms of what these look like. And then we have the breakdown here for each of the sections. So this enables you to just sort of look at where a lot of your carbon footprint is coming from, where areas could be improved. And also, look at just sort of what goes into the production and the printing of a book. The other thing that you can do is then export a branded PDF where this will also be captured if you wanted to put that into your files. And if you realized, for example, if this number came out as 800,000 and you think perhaps I have made a mistake, you can pop down and edit the calculation and go back. So I have run calculations where content creation or, one of these areas was way, way too high. And then I would likely flag that a mistake has been made. I can go back and edit the calculation and look through and see if there's an area that could use adjustment. So that brings us through all of this. And then if I head back to the dashboard, I will now see that this calculation is complete. And then a few other features that you have here. You can view the results. You can edit the calculation if you think there's an issue. You can also duplicate this if you're doing a second print run at some point, let's say, where most of the stats would be identical. And then when you have more calculations, you can also begin to sort them through this view. So view, edit, duplicate, and delete, and it will show you your kilograms of CO2e per book. Okay, that essentially brings us to the end of kind of this demo. I've given you a really quick run through. I know I was moving fast. If you have any questions about this, obviously we're gonna, oh, thanks, EJ. We're gonna take some questions now as well, but on this website, you can also look at our FAQs page, which details a lot about, why the calculator, is it free, methodology, some of the terms, as well as our privacy policy, terms and conditions, that kind of thing, and a bit about it as well, where it goes into some of what we've gone into today, but also the methodology and just a little bit more about the project itself. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I would invite now, we have about 15 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or is anybody using the calculator already? We'd love to just hear a little bit more about kind of how people may be using this or the concerns that they have, because we are well aware that this is a work in progress. And part of the reason that we wanted to get this out is, the more that something, there is no improvement without use, essentially. And we would like a large number of people to be thinking about this work and providing us with feedback so that we can move into kind of making improvements in a V2. I would ask Brian, Jen and EJ, the GBA team, if you want to kind of hop on and then we can take some questions.
You've been presenting, so there have been some good questions in the chat that
Okay.
All of us have been kind of chiming in on. But Lauren, what do you think? Which is it worth going back to some of these and just having a little bit of a conversation about them?
Yeah, I think one that might be interesting is to go back to the conversation, or not the conversation, the point made about the different, like what a spread is, and maybe kind of robustly define that here. Jen has handily answered someone's question there, but if we could kind of revisit that, Jiren, and distinguish that here, that might be helpful. Seems to be one where people kind of stumble a bit.
Yeah, let's capture that in the video. Did I hear that Jen already answered it? Jen, would you like to speak to that again?
Sure, I can. So the answer is that it depends. First, it depends if we're talking about the cover or the interior. I think this question was in terms of the interior. And when you think about the interior of a book, the spine is not a part of the calculation. So it's literally just twice the width of the page. So if you have a 6 by 9 book, your spread is 12 inches. If you were talking about the cover, when we think about, for example, either the jacket of a paperback or a dust jacket on a hardcover, the spine is a part of that. So that's where we want to include the spine because extra paper makes that spine. It is very small, like considering one cover compared to say 400 pages in a book. But yes, so the spread, you're always doubling the width of your book for the interior, and for the cover, we need to make sure the spine is part of it.
Thanks so much, Jen. Um, I'm just looking into the chat as well. We had an example of a good footprint or like a range. Um, I know this differs greatly, so I'm going to, Jen and EJ, do you have a thought on that?
That was my first thought. I was like, it depends. So, um, yeah, it because it's all so variable. Everything is dependent on what you put into the tool. So I think what I would suggest is actually use the tool, pick some different kinds of papers, because papers are going to be the thing that really shift the needle. So try a paper with a higher carbon footprint, and then try one with a lower carbon footprint, and that'll be the main thing that's going to make the difference. And then you will have so take one book that you're printing, keep everything the same except for the papers, and then you'll start to get an idea of what's possible for you.
I would second that by saying, and say also that extent is a big factor in that too. So to say like now we're getting existential, but like what is the book? How long is it? Like there's a difference between a book that's 100 pages long and one that's 600 pages long. And the big difference there is the volume of paper, which we've seen is the highest part of the calculation. That being said, like I just did a 300-page book with the 100% recycled Sustana, and that was putting us about 1.28 kilograms. I think something in the 1 to 2 range is like something that I expect to see at this point for a North American publisher. But that being said, truly the best thing to do is to play with the kind of paper you're using and also like how long your book is. One thing we talk about in terms of reducing emissions is making those books a little shorter, however we can, whether that's using smart typesetting or making conscious choices about back matter or that kind of thing. So you'll notice a difference there too. Oh, and I just want to say, since I was talking about dust jackets and I saw a comment about dust jackets, dust jackets we didn't include it in the calculator. Beyond because it's pretty minor. Like anything that was going to be well under 1% of the book's emissions, we left it out for simplicity's sake. But it's possible that in the future we can maybe work something like that in.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of questions in the chat, but I do just want to capture a couple quick answers here in terms of suggestions for do we plan to expand the countries that are captured so that there is, do we have plans to introduce more countries to the publisher country dropdown so that the grid electricity measurement would be more relevant to the regional emission factors? Yes, that is absolutely something that we're looking into. It is, as most of this work is, easier said than done. But these are the kinds of things, if you are chiming in from somewhere else in the world and you don't feel that the calculator captures certain aspects of the way that you do your book production, we would love to hear that. Even if it's not, right now, please send us a message. There is a contact form on the calculator, and you can always reach us on the contact form through our website or just at info@greenbookalliance.org. Because this is, we are really proud of this work. We are really happy to get this out into the world, and we would really like people to be using it. But that being said, we know that there's always infinite things that can be improved, and we would really like to compile that so that as each version progresses, we are getting a little bit closer and a little bit closer to something more granular, to something that most effectively captures carbon calculation for a variety of workflows and a variety of regions. I'm scrolling through the chat, but Brian and Lauren, is there anything else you wanted to highlight here?
I'm just saying I'm creating a document with everyone's feature requests as we speak. So I'm following along rapidly as everyone's adding things. So just thank you to everyone for engaging already at this early stage. And we really are excited to get you all using the calculator and sending your feedback as you start to integrate this into your workflows. So thank you, Joren. The demo was great. The contributions in the chat have been really exciting, but please, other people can absolutely take this space. Yeah.
Well, I saw that you answered the question about special effects, deckled edges, et cetera, as something we have on the roadmap, but not necessarily not in the current version. But I think Jen and EJ would tell you that what you've heard, particularly from Jen in this earlier, that this thing certainly presents, it certainly includes all the things that would be most impactful for carbon footprint. So the work required to create deckled edges, as an example, may have a minor carbon footprint. You're pretty close directionally. I think this gets you exactly where you want to be.
Does anybody have any final questions? We'd also love to hear any thoughts or comments before we kind of close out this session.
I'd like to answer. Jonathan is asking, from a UK perspective, would you recommend waiting until UK emission factors are added? And I think it's absolutely up to the individual. If you have an alternative carbon calculator that you're very happy with and includes UK emissions factors, then you can make that choice. But we're not trying to substitute. But if you don't, or if you want to start a conversation around paper, which is getting those figures directly, which would at least eliminate some of the need for UK emissions factors for the paper part of the calculation, you can start there. The thing that this is really geared to do, and I think, Joren, you said this at the outset, and I did as well, is to foster a conversation between you and your trading partners, for you to be more aware of the carbon impact. It's not a calculation to rule all calculations. It's really directional in nature. We're just trying to get people started. So I would invoke the thing I periodically say in the Green Book Alliance conversations and elsewhere, which is no tool gets better without use. And so if you want to wait until it solves all of your problems, you can, but but if everybody does that, we don't really get to where we need to be. So I don't have a problem with trying it and recognizing the limitations.
Absolutely. I just wanted to also highlight, someone has asked, they would like to hear more of the story about how we got the data to support these calculations. In the FAQ, there is some information on methodology, but if you want further detail, please send us an email, because I won't, begin to detail every single thing now, but we are really happy to talk about like everything that goes into all of the various stages of that. Transparency is something that we feel is really important in this work. It's also just a little bit tedious in terms of laying it out. And if it's not something that people are familiar with, it can be incredibly daunting. So trying to keep the interface of the calculator really clean is one of the things that we had discussed. But if you have questions about it or would like to discuss the ways in which certain areas may or may not apply to you, or the concerns that you have, etc., please send us an email because we would actually love to talk about this more. Yeah, I just wanted to say that as well. And I'm just flipping through. Oh, yes, there's the FAQ.
John Warren had raised
Oh,
his hand, and John, go ahead.
Yeah, how's it going? This is great. So I put a question in the chat which is related to with print on demand, you're less likely to have, waste usually. You're not going to overprint as much. So is there any way to calculate that in this? If you click the print on demand option, does it account for like less
Right.
waste?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you'd like to go back, Jaren, and show the pages where we calculate that.
yeah, let me pull that up. And Jen or EJ, do you want to speak to print on demand while I look for this?
I don't think that there is intrinsic in the calculation a reduction in destroyed stock because you are entering those numbers yourself. So you could enter nothing will be destroyed because if you're, for example, if you're printing to order, that means no returns, no destroyed inventory, and that won't be a part of your final carbon footprint at all. The only thing I would caution with print on demand is the content creation numbers can skew high because one of the, unless this has been changed by the GBA folks, one of the challenges is that it takes those content creation numbers and divides it by the number of copies you're printing and assumes that's all you've ever printed of that title. Whereas if you're doing a reprint, you may have already printed 5,000 copies of that title. You're just printing 100 today. So that can be a little wonky. But yeah, intrinsically, in terms of destruction, that's going to be the part that you enter.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, at the beginning with the print on demand, it says to estimate how many copies you expect to print like over time, right? Not just like one.
Yeah.
You might just print 20, obviously, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
the way New Society does that, we do some print on demand, and because we calculate our carbon every year, we do it after 12 months. So we have the actual numbers that came through the print on demand program in the previous 12 months. So we're doing it after the fact. But if you're using it as a predictive tool, then yeah, you're just going to have to make an estimate of what you hope you're going to print throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
There's just a quick. We have a little bit of time, so I wanted to see. Jen was asked if you could talk about content creation numbers, so that if you were doing a reprint, the content creation numbers would be 0 because you've already accounted for them. Is that something you're thinking about?
I was just checking to see if we made those numbers mandatory or not, because that would affect. You could just leave them out. Yes.
They shouldn't be mandatory. This is something that I will take one moment, sorry, Jen, to
Oh, good.
go into this. So we went back and forth a lot about what fields should be mandatory. And effectively, what we went with is very few are in fact mandatory. But at the end of the calculation, anything that hasn't been filled out will populate in a list that will say, this calculation may be less accurate because you have not filled out these 325 fields, and it will show a list of those things. So you can omit things, whether it's because it doesn't apply to you, because, as somebody had said, maybe it's a reprint and there is no content creation or there's very little, or, for this area. But also, if there are areas that are real barriers for you that you are getting stuck on and you want to still be trying to work through these calculations. So it will list for you the things that you have omitted at the end, but you can skip through many things. There are only a handful of mandatory fields. But that being said, we don't encourage you to skip many of them, but it does allow for a little bit more leeway with different workflows and different kind of scenarios for this. So that brings up a good point. Thank you.
And I would say that it makes a lot of sense to omit it in a second printing, because the carbon impact of content creation whether it should be allocated across a lifetime or not, has been fully captured in the first printing. So it's, if anything, a reprint then comes in with a lower carbon footprint number, in part because of the previous accounting. There was the one last, Chris was asking about APIs, and Lauren accurately says, this is what we were trying to do in scope one, is to build on both the methodology, the carbon thinking that went into the development of the first model, replicate it and make it freely available in a web interface. And we're glad that we've been able to accomplish that. But the methodology hasn't changed from the original Canadian-based carbon calculator. And the only thing that's changed is our reliance on numbers, paper numbers that had required a license. So this is a pretty good replication of that tool. And if you go out, not download it, but go out, sign up and start to use it, we'll have a lot of use cases coming in that, and use the link that's available to you to tell us what you'd like to do. Because I think the more people use it, the more likely we're going to get feedback that we can act on.
Absolutely. With that, I'll give a last call before we wrap up. Does anybody else have any questions? Again, if you think about something a little later, or you get a little bit deeper into the calculator and you have follow-up questions, please reach out, contact us. I will say a couple more things on the subject, but does anybody have any final questions before I move forward to the last orders of business? No. Okay, lovely. Okay. Okay, so as we wrap up, I do want to talk briefly about what's next. First of all, and again, this calculator has reached this point because of a massive collaboration across the industry. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for engaging with this. That is one of the first steps. We could not have done this project without BIC, BISG, and BookNet Canada, without our funding from our project partners, Friesens, Gibbs Smith, and Publishing Scotland, everyone who tested and provided feedback, and of course, Jen and EJ, ECW Press, and New Society. Thank you so much for creating a movement with this work, truly. However, and as we know, maintaining and improving this work requires ongoing investment. So as we are now beginning on planning version 2, we are also looking for financial support for this project as well. Our goal is to secure support from approximately 20 organizations, and we're asking for a donation of around $500 from individual organizations. So we'd love to see some industry buy-in from this, not in massive amounts, but we would like to see many people saying, yeah, this work matters and we want to see more resources go into it. And then for associations and organizations representing multiple stakeholders, we'd love to see more in the 2,000 to 3,000 range. But every contribution directly supports improving a resource that benefits hopefully our entire publishing industry and community. So If you've got a little wiggle room in your budget, please reach out to us in the same with your questions, comments, and concerns. If you're like, yeah, we could donate a little bit to supporting the V2 of this project. If you like what you've currently seen, this is what we could do on our original budget that we pulled together, and we would really like to continue to expand it. Now, our final thing is there will be a few upcoming events in the calendar for support for using the carbon calculator. I'm going to make them live shortly after this event. We're calling it BYOB, Bring Your Own Book to Carbon Calculation. So today we did a calculation with sample data, but we'd ask that you come to that workshop to run through step-by-step help for running a calculation with your own data. And so this recording will be sent out via email. This will be on our website and on our YouTube channel. And along with the information that is posted there, it will also link to our events page. So we're going to be running a couple of those Bring Your Own Book carbon calculation workshops where it will be a little bit more of working time to go through and step-by-step use the carbon calculator with your own data. So those will start, I think, in the next couple weeks. So take this time. We've looked at it. We've gone through it today. Take this time to now look through your own data. You will be provided with a list of the information that you should start to work on sourcing if you haven't been having those conversations or this is the first time you're thinking about carbon calculation. And we're going to be running kind of essentially a how to use the carbon calculator 101, very similar to this, but again, using data that is relevant to your own organization. With that, that brings us to the end. Again, a huge thank you to everybody for being here. We really believe in this work, and we really believe that it is going to take, a small village to get this to continue with the momentum that we currently have. So please continue to engage and reach out if you have any questions. And we hope to see you at the workshop in just a few weeks. Thanks so much, everyone.